1 week since the Walton County School stabbing, investigators have been busy interviewing nearly 50 student eyewitnesses from Walton Middle School.
News Channel 7's Rachel Flynn reports on how the investigation is going and how the 3 victims are doing.
It's been a week since the stabbing at Walton Middle School that injured 2 7th grade students and a paraprofessional. We spoke with the superintendent, Russell Hughes, who says the paraprofessional is doing well and even returned to school on Tuesday.
I said to her personally, you take as much time as you need. And she's back today, and I'm glad to report that.
The superintendent says the paraprofessional who was hurt after trying to help an injured student has worked at the school for 20 years.
Talk about strength, talk about tenacity, talk about commitment and confidence in the atmosphere.
As for the condition of the students, the superintendent says one has been released and the other is still hospitalized.
We want them at school. That's their place. And we're not going to let anyone rob children from the place they deserve to be on a daily basis safely.
As the investigation continues, Chief Deputy Dustin Cosin says they've interviewed nearly 50 student witnesses, including the victims.
Make sure that if there is any bit of a little bit of information, any small amount really can add to what we're trying to determine, what was the reason? And that's really the biggest question.
Cosin says after interviewing the suspect, they are still trying to determine a motive.
There could be something that we don't know yet. And so when you start talking about motive could be because he saw something or because he heard something. But right now we really do not know.
The superintendent says 91% of the student body has returned to school and that he is continuing to check in on the 2 students that were injured in the incident. In Walton County, Rachel Flynn, News Channel 7.
The chief deputy says it's still early in the investigation, and Walton County Sheriff's deputies are working hard to close gaps in the investigation as more information comes in.
There continues to be an increased police presence at the school, as well as resources offered to students as they continue to process the traumatic event.